Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, January 28th. A lot to talk about this morning. We still have a weekend storm threat here in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. A lot of details yet to be ironed out. We'll talk about all the players involved over the next several minutes. Still strong signs for kind of a pattern change as we evolve into the month of February. Next week looks like a lot of that cold air that's been bottled up near Alaska in recent weeks will finally break loose, and at least a part of that Arctic cold will come down south and east, head into the central and eastern U.S. probably during the second half of next week. That could even set the stage for a snow event in the eastern U.S. at the end of next week, but that's way out there in speculation phase right now. We can't even decipher exactly what's going on this upcoming weekend. But let's talk about, first of all, the big picture by looking at the ensemble run of the GFS last night at 0Z. First of all, in 500 millibar height anomalies, and then we'll take a look at the corresponding 850 millibar temperature anomalies going forward here. First of all, we continue to have higher heights than normal over Canada, and a lot of below normal heights over Alaska. And again, this is where it's been very cold in recent weeks, one of the coldest Januaries they've experienced in many, many years. Again, Fairbanks yesterday was down to 35 below or so, and it looks like some of this cold air will finally make a move over the next week to 10 days or so into the central U.S. and spill over into the eastern U.S. probably the second half of next week. But let's keep moving forward here and take a look at what evolves. First of all, we talked about this yesterday. There is a wave down across the deep south, but that basically moves from west to east, does not have an impact in the mid-Atlantic region. It will have some impact across the southeast U.S. Here we are now by Thursday morning. Continuation of higher heights over Canada, below normal heights over Alaska. Watch what happens along the west coast here. We talked about, some of the signs that favor the possibility of a coastal storm this weekend. One of those signs is a ridge popping aloft across the western U.S. That's usually a kind of a requirement, or certainly a characteristic of East Coast storms. And here we have the orange here represents higher heights than normal, and it starts to develop over the western U.S. by late in the work week, going into the early part of the weekend. And here we are by Saturday morning, February 1st, a ridge popping out in the west, and here's that upper level feature in the eastern U.S. that should help to spawn a storm. The question is, will it really intensify by the time it reaches off the mid-Atlantic coastline, or will it wait to intensify a little bit farther to the north and east? That's the question right now in terms of impact in the mid-Atlantic region. And again, we talked about this yesterday, temperatures will be borderline, even with a low pressure area right in this kind of a favorable position for snow in the I-95 corridor. That is certainly not a guarantee by any means with this particular system. There will not be an Arctic air mass in place as we begin the weekend. It doesn't mean it can't snow. It doesn't mean it can't be accumulating snow. As a storm in this position, if it becomes strong enough, actually can help to kind of generate its own cold air. But more on that over the next few minutes. Let's keep moving forward here. Now, notice the below normal heights here over Alaska starting to drop to the south and east, and with it, cold air mass, colder than normal air mass, finally breaking loose from Alaska and dropping south and east. And look at that, that moves all the way into the central U.S., that trough, and then expands into the eastern U.S. Now we're talking the middle of next week. This is now a forecast map for Wednesday, February 5th, a little bit more than a week away. And all of a sudden it just kind of explodes here in the central and eastern U.S. with a deep trough setting up, and again that colder air pouring into the central and eastern U.S. The flow in the upper atmosphere at this time northwest here, pushing air into the Great Lakes and into the northeast U.S. And again, that could set the stage for a snow event in the eastern U.S. towards the end of next week. Still far and away in the speculation phase at this point in time. Well, let's take a look at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies going forward. This is now a look at North America from the 0Z run of the ensemble version of the GFS. Let's start off here just by showing this again. Very cold in Alaska, and that cold air has been bottled up over Alaska for the last few weeks here, and we'll watch what happens over the next week or so as we push forward here. Again, the cold air in Alaska eventually it drops to the south and east. Now let's keep moving forward here. These are again temperature anomalies a couple thousand feet up in the atmosphere here. Now this is for tomorrow. Above normal conditions here across Canada, still below normal over Alaska. And as we approach the latter part of the work week, a little bit below normal here going into Friday, and then relatively normal conditions here as we head into the weekend. And that's the problem. If indeed a storm forms off the mid-Atlantic coastline, be borderline temperature-wise in the I-95 corridor. It will be a battle zone between rain and snow. Again, it does not mean we cannot get accumulating snow. That is certainly on the table here if indeed a storm does form. And now let's keep moving forward and again keep focused on the Alaska cold, and here it goes. It's starting to make that move to the south and east over the weekend into the early part of next week, and eventually that cold air spills on over from the central U.S. into the eastern U.S. and again basically arriving, it looks like maybe the middle part of next week, following a strong frontal passage here in the eastern U.S. And once it arrives, it'll kind of stick around for a while. There'll be a reinforcing cold air mass, it looks like, headed towards Alaska or the western part of Canada. We may relax a little bit in the east, but overall it stays normal to below normal, and then a secondary push follows. And then we're not talking about more than 10 days away now, 10 to 14 days away or so, but this is a pretty cold look upcoming as we transition from January into February, especially the first couple weeks of February could become quite interesting as again some of that Alaska cold breaks away and moves to the south and east. Well, let's now focus in on the weekend threat here in the Mid-Atlantic region, and this is the forecast map from the 0Z GFS, operational GFS model run, and this is for Thursday early afternoon. This is actually the 500 millibar wave of energy of importance, not even over land until sometime during the day on Thursday. Computer forecast models tend to do a little bit better job in the forecast when a wave of energy moves over land, simply because we kind of have a better data when it moves over land throughout the atmosphere, from the ground up to the upper part of the atmosphere. But this is where this wave of energy will be on Thursday afternoon. The main point there is still a few days to go before we'll have a real good handle on the situation for the weekend. Now let's move forward here and watch what happens. Again, keeping focus on this. This is Thursday afternoon. It slides to the south and east. Here it is by Friday afternoon, 24 hours later. And then it dives to the south and east. And this is the location come Saturday morning. And there's another wave out here as well of energy. And that's, again, part of the problem why it's a difficult forecast right now. Exactly the placement of these waves of energy, just too early to be all that certain right now. And the interaction between the southern stream and this northern stream will dictate exactly where that storm forms. Again, the possibility for low pressure to intensify in this region right here off the mid-Atlantic coastline and then continue off to the north and east. But exactly how quick and how dramatic intensification there is yet to be determined. Here we go now by Saturday afternoon. This becomes the main wave, and the GFS, which right now in this particular run was a little bit bullish on a weekend storm, as opposed to, for example, the European model, which does not right now have that Saturday storm threat, not nearly as prevalent as GFS, but again, there's still time for that to change. But here we go by a Saturday evening, a couple waves of energy in the upper part of the atmosphere, and this is where a lot of action might be on Saturday. Well, before we take a look at the surface forecast maps from the 0Z GFS, just one last look at that 500 millibar vorticity field. Again, vorticity is kind of a spin in the upper part of the atmosphere that leads to upward motion in the atmosphere, and really in the areas of a vorticity maxima can be surface low pressure development. And this is the way it'll look according to the GFS model run on Saturday morning, with that one wave of energy here up across the north and another wave of energy in the southern stream. Exactly how these interact yet to be determined, and that will dictate whether the storm slides off to the south and east of the Mid-Atlantic region, or whether it pulls up in this area. Also, whether it will intensify here or wait till it gets up to here to intensify. Still just too early to say, but those are some of the players that we'll be monitoring over the next few days. Well, let's wrap up this long discussion here by looking at the surface forecast maps, again using the 0Z GFS model run. Bit of a breeze today in the northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic region. Still kind of a decent pressure gradient here. Mostly cloudy skies, maybe some sunshine this afternoon, but continuation of moderate cold, dry conditions for the next few days here. Now let's move forward here. Again, there was pretty impressive little low down across the deep south. That basically moves from west to east, does not have an impact on the Mid-Atlantic region. And then we get into the latter part of the work week and going into the weekend, and again, this is one model run, the GFS from 0Z. Other models disagree with a storm threat for the weekend, but again, a few days for that to be ironed out. Here we go by Friday night. A lot of moisture here down in the southeastern U.S., but notice no strong high here showing up across the southeastern part of Canada or a New England area now, and that's one of the things I like to look for in terms of whether or not we have enough cold air for snow in the I-95 corridor region. Not all that impressive, but not impossible to get low pressure here that intensifies. By the time it moves off the coast, it could kind of generate enough cold air for accumulating snow. And here we go by Saturday morning. Last night's 0Z GFS model run had some snow across generally from DC north and maybe from the Mason-Dixon line north. Again, it would be a battle zone in this area here for rain versus snow without that strong Arctic high. Intensifies here. Watch, by the way, the intensification of this particular run. It's, I think, 003 millibars here, then 992, then 983, and then 971, all the way to 964. That's kind of dramatic intensification from this particular run of the GFS model from Saturday into Sunday. Let's backtrack again. So this has a decent snow, especially north of the Mason-Dixon line, maybe more in the form of rain south of there in DC if this were to verify this particular model run. Again, some of the other models have the storm sliding off farther to the south and east and intensifying at a slower pace than this particular model run, thereby not producing much precipitation in the Mid-Atlantic region. Still a few days to iron this out, and again, we may not have a real good handle on this until Thursday or even Friday of this week. And still some interesting signs for next week, with probably some of that cold air that's been bottled up over Alaska making its way into the central and eastern U.S. for the second half of next week. That's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.